In my last video, I introduced my triple 47-inch screen racing sim setup, which I managed to fit in our tiny lounge room. However, I do have a long list of upgrades that I'd like to undertake in the future. The most important is securing the pedals to the floor. If you start with a basic Logitech setup, you'd be familiar with the pedals that just sit on the floor and they have this retractable spiky strip that pops out that grips it to the carpet. Either that or the little rubber feet if it's sitting on tiles, but it's not ideal. So you know, if you put too much pressure on the accelerator or mainly the brake, it'll just push the pedals out of the way. And I also mentioned in the last video that my pedals also sit up against our front sliding door. When someone walks through the door in the middle of the race, it knocks the pedals out from under my feet. So I thought about this long and hard, and there was a lot of ways I thought of doing it. I was going to try and attach it to the desk or attach it to the chair. It's a multiple use living area and we couldn't use the chair if the pedals were attached to it. So the only option I really have is to attach it to the desk. And I tried to do it on the cheap. So I just used some scrap wood and some other scrap material that I had laying around. The other thing I wanted to do was also get the pedal platform up on a bit of an angle, so the pedals, instead of sitting like this, like you were sitting at a normal computer chair, there'd be more of an angle that is sort of natural to a real car. So what I've done is cut two triangular pieces of 32mm pine, measured how high I'd like to have the pedals, bolted them to another solid piece of 32mm, glued and bolted all that together. And then I had a scrap offcut of some ACM, which is like plastic used in the signage industry, and then screwed the whole unit to that. And then I used the weight of the desk alone to push down on the ACM and hold it into place. Now this seemed to work. It was quite difficult. I did have to use a car jack under sections of the desk and lift it up. I mentioned that it was made of scaffold, so I just bolted it in under the scaffold to lift the desk up. As you can see, I've also added some carpet, which makes it feel more like the footwell of a car. Now this works really, really well. It's solid. I can push really hard on the brake without moving anything, which means I can use a separate foot on the brake and the accelerator. Then before I couldn't do that, I would just push the whole thing out of the way. Now this caused a few problems. Now that the pedals are actually up on an angle, it's moved them forward. Realized sitting in place, it feels really comfortable, but I've now moved back from the screens quite substantially. It's about 300mm further away from the screen, which is about a foot. So that's a significant difference. I've had to sit there and feel where the wheel felt natural, which meant I had to put an extension bar, which I used another offcut of the 32mm pine, and I've bolted that with 6 hefty bolts to the rest of the desk, extended that out, and bolted the wheel to that. Now this also meant that I had to change all of the settings in all of the racing sims, change my field of view, had to change the angle of the screens ever so slightly to about 60 degrees. However, this feels so much better, just being that a little bit back from the screen. I've actually managed to beat all of my lap time records within a few hours. Now another thing you'll see that I've also added these little wings onto the side of the extension, so then I can fit tablets to sit there closer to the wheel, and before they were sort of teetering on the edge of the desk and not in the right place, my hands are in the way. Now the other thing is, because I've lowered the wheel a little bit and moved it further away from the screens, you don't see any of the dash of the car on screen anymore. It's just ever so slightly below to have it like line up with your eye line correctly. And by moving it out further, I can now put a tablet in behind the steering wheel, and that acts as a dash. And I'm running SimHub underneath all of that. I just have to load up SimHub first, and that sends all the data to the tablets and acts as a dash. And this feels more realistic. Now there's one other thing I wanted to do as well, and that's close in the whole footwell to make it feel more like a real car, and also block off a bit of the window that's behind it. Because if something moves outside, like when the wind starts blowing or blowing stuff around, you see it out of the corner of your eye down by your feet, and it's distracting. You wouldn't think it would be, but it is. It's enough to take your eyes off the road for a couple of seconds, which could mean everything in a race. So for this, I've just used some core flute, which is like a thin plastic used for real estate signs, and I've just measured and cut that to shape, used a staple gun to staple that to the 32mm pine that's already in place. And then for the sides, I've just cut that to shape with some little tabs, and then used duct tape to tape that together. So I just wanted to show you that you can bolt the pedals down and do it really, really cheap. A little bit dodgy, but it works, using scrap materials, and makes it more accessible for those that want to get into the world of sim racing without breaking the bank. Oh, Fluffkins. Don't think he wants me to do sim racing. Oh.